Rest is often described as something natural and restorative, yet for many people it feels strangely uncomfortable, unsettling, or even unsafe. This reflection explores why slowing down can trigger restlessness, anxiety, or a sense of emptiness instead of relief, especially for those who have learned to survive by staying alert, productive, or emotionally contained. This video is for those who find it easier to keep moving than to pause, who feel uneasy when there is nothing demanding their attention, and who may associate rest with loss of control, vulnerability, or falling behind. It gently examines how rest can surface emotions that were previously held back, and how a nervous system conditioned by a long-term strength may not immediately recognize stillness as safe. Here, rest is not framed as a reward or a destination, but as a skill that often needs to be relearned, especially after years of coping through endurance. There is no pressure to relax, no instruction to fix yourself, and no expectation to change anything right away. This space simply invites awareness, allowing you to notice your relationship with rest without judgment. This content is for educational and reflective purposes only. It is based on real-life experiences and personal growth journeys, shared to invite awareness, not conclusions. We encourage kind, respectful discussion and constructive comments. If this resonates with you, you may want to continue with the next reflections in this series, where we explore emotional safety, burnout, and how strength and rest can exist together without conflict. For some people, rest does not bring ease or comfort, but instead creates a quiet sense of unease, as if slowing down removes a layer of protection rather than offering relief. When activity stops, the absence of motion can feel unsettling, because the body and mind are no longer occupied with managing, responding, or staying ahead of what might go wrong. In these moments, doing nothing may trigger restlessness instead of calm, not because rest is harmful, but because your system has learned to associate safety with alertness, productivity, or emotional control. Without these familiar signals, stillness can feel exposed, leaving you unsure of what might surface or how to respond. This discomfort is not a personal failure, but a reflection of conditioning, where the nervous system has adapted to function best under tension, movement, or constant engagement. Slowing down disrupts that pattern, creating a temporary sense of imbalance as the body searches for the cues it associates with stability. As a result, rest can activate anxiety rather than relief, making it difficult to relax into stillness even when there is no immediate threat. This response is not a sign that something is wrong with you, but an indication that your system has not yet learned how to recognize calm as safe. By naming this experience without judgment, you begin to understand that the discomfort you feel during rest is not resistance, but a learned response, and that awareness itself is the first step toward redefining what safety can feel like when you allow yourself to slow down. For many people, the sense of worth did not form around who they were, but around what they could do, how much they could handle, and how consistently they could perform, especially in environments where praise, attention, or safety arrived only when effort was visible. Over time, this conditioning quietly taught you that being valuable meant being active, useful, or productive, while rest became associated with stagnation, weakness, or falling behind. When you stop, even briefly, a subtle discomfort can appear, not because rest is wrong, but because it interrupts the familiar loop where action equals worth. In this framework, doing nothing can feel like becoming nothing, and slowing down can trigger the fear that you are losing momentum, relevance, or identity. Rest begins to resemble a risk rather than a necessity, because it removes the behaviors that once confirmed your place and purpose. This pattern does not come from ambition alone, but from early messages that equated effort with acceptance, and output with belonging. As a result, rest is misinterpreted as a loss of value, rather than a restoration of capacity. By recognizing this link without judgment, you begin to see that the unease you feel when resting is not laziness or lack of discipline, but a learned association, where worth was measured through motion, and stillness was never given the chance to feel safe. For a nervous system that has spent years adapting to pressure, unpredictability, or emotional demand, tension becomes familiar, and familiarity is often mistaken for safety. In this state, the body learns to function best while slightly activated, alert, or braced, because that is when it learned how to cope, respond, and stay in control. When stress has been the baseline for a long time, relaxation does not automatically feel soothing, but strange, unfamiliar, and even unsettling. As the body slows down, the absence of tension can feel like a loss of orientation, leaving the system unsure of what to do without the signals it once relied on to feel prepared. Silence, stillness, or quiet moments may then trigger vigilance rather than ease, because the nervous system interprets the lack of stimulation as uncertainty, scanning for threats instead of settling into rest. This is not resistance to healing, but a learned survival response, where calm was never practiced long enough to feel safe. In such systems, rest can activate an internal alarm, creating sensations of restlessness, anxiety, or discomfort that seem to appear without reason. The body is not rejecting rest, but reacting to it as something unknown, because safety was historically associated with staying alert rather than slowing down. Understanding this response with compassion allows you to see that difficulty resting is not a failure of will or discipline, but a reflection of what your nervous system has been trained to expect. Rest, in this context, is not a natural default, but a new language the body has not yet learned how to speak. When movement slows and distractions fall away, emotions that have been held back often rise to the surface, not because rest creates them, but because rest removes the layers that once kept them contained and out of awareness. In stillness, there is less noise to buffer what has been quietly accumulating beneath constant activity. As you pause, feelings such as sadness, emptiness, or a deep, undefined tiredness may appear without warning, creating discomfort that feels overwhelming simply because it has not been given space before. These emotions are not new, but they can feel sudden when the usual momentum that kept them at bay is no longer present. The mind, recognizing this discomfort, often responds by seeking busyness, not out of productivity, but as a protective reflex. redirecting attention toward tasks, plans, or stimulation in order to avoid sitting with what feels heavy or unclear. Activity becomes a way to regain distance from inner states that seem too complex or vulnerable to face. In this pattern, busyness is less about accomplishment and more about regulation, helping the system stay away from emotional exposure that feels unsafe or unmanageable. Slowing down threatens this balance, because it invites contact with feelings that have been postponed rather than processed. Understanding this dynamic gently reframes rest-related discomfort as a signal rather than a problem, showing that the unease is not caused by rest itself, but by what rest allows to surface. In this sense, constant activity functions as an avoidance strategy, keeping emotions contained through motion, and making stillness feel risky simply because it opens the door to what has long been waiting to be felt. When strength has shaped your sense of self for a long time, it can quietly become more than a response to difficulty and begin to function as an identity, organizing how you see yourself and how you believe others see you. In this role, being capable, composed, and reliable is not just something you do, but something you are expected to embody. As a result, rest can feel disorienting, because without the familiar tension of effort, the structure that once defined you begins to loosen. Slowing down may create a sense of emptiness or confusion, not because something is missing, but because the role of the strong one has been providing direction and meaning. When this role softens, questions arise that feel unsettling, such as who you are when you are not holding things together, and what remains when performance pauses. These moments can trigger fear, because stepping out of a long-held identity can feel like losing yourself entirely. There is often an underlying concern that without strength as a defining feature, your value, relevance, or sense of purpose may fade, reinforcing the belief that stopping is dangerous. In this way, rest threatens a familiar identity, not because it removes who you truly are, but because it interrupts a version of yourself that has been built around endurance, making it difficult to imagine safety or belonging outside of constant effort. There is a quiet relief in realizing that nothing about you needs to be corrected or rebuilt, because what you are experiencing is not a flaw in who you are, but the natural response of a system that has been asked to stay strong for far longer than it was ever meant to. You are not failing for feeling tired, unsettled, or unsure when you slow down, and you are not losing your strength by noticing your limits, because exhaustion is not a sign of weakness, but a sign that your resilience has been working continuously without enough space to soften. In this recognition, there is no demand to change yourself or to let go of everything that once helped you survive. Only an invitation to allow yourself to ease slightly, to release the constant tension of holding everything together, and to notice what remains when effort is no longer the center of your existence. Softening does not erase your capability, history, or depth, but allows your strength to exist without pain, without constant vigilance, and without the belief that endurance must always come at a personal cost. This newer understanding of strength does not require suffering to prove its value, nor does it ask you to keep performing stability in order to belong, because strength that no longer hurts is not diminished. but more sustainable and honest. By simply acknowledging that you no longer need to be strong in the same way, you create room for rest, connection, and self-recognition to emerge naturally, without forcing outcomes or answers. This content is for educational and reflective purposes only. It is based on real-life experiences and personal growth journeys, shared to invite awareness, not conclusions. We encourage kind, respectful discussion and constructive comments. If this reflection resonates, you are invited to continue with the next video. Why rest feels uncomfortable to you, where we gently explore why slowing down can feel unsettling after a lifetime of being strong.